Well, welcome everyone to the Spoken Gospel Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We are continuing our quick series looking at some of the difficult passages in 1 Corinthians. And today we're looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and head coverings for men and women. Seth, what is your background with this concept? Like when you think about 1 Corinthians 11, head coverings, what comes to mind?
I don't look good in hats.
You don't look good in hats.
That's like
you never wear hats. That's
I never wear hats. I remember I was wearing hats as a kid, and I always thought my ears looked too big, so I stopped wearing hats.
I've known you for almost 20 years, and I've never known that.
So I don't wear hats.
That's really
I'll wear a
funny.
beanie because it covers your ears a little bit.
Yeah,
but that's
only when it's cold.
But only when it's cold.
You're running outside or something.
That's right.
Okay, so you're very obedient to the no head coverings for men.
Yeah, I'm like an absolutist, like a no hat absolutist.
Fantastic. What else comes to mind?
That's it.
Okay,
No.
great.
I mean, I think this is just, it's always in my mind as a problem passage.
Yeah.
So I come to it like on edge
Yeah.
every time I come to it. And like I've got some cultural awareness that head coverings are common in a lot of other parts of the world currently.
Yep.
And have been so for thousands of years.
That's right.
So like wearing, especially for women.
Yeah.
So it's like, I know that.
Yep.
I know the Bible was written at a time when that was
A
common.
very normal thing.
A
Yep.
normal thing. And even when it comes to 1 Corinthians, there might even be a sense that like a head covering kind of functioned like a wedding ring would today. That was kind of what I've heard. It's
Okay.
like, it's a symbol that a woman has been taken. And so like the veil was a sign of her unavailability in the same way.
Unavailability.
Oh, wow. I did not even catch that.
Couldn't help myself.
Yeah, and so in the same way a wedding ring would do today, it's like,
Yeah, sure,
it's like that's why Paul is saying, wives, you should wear a head covering because you belong to your husband, and stop advertising yourself as available when you're
There
not.
you go.
So I've heard that.
Yep.
And then I know this passage gets weird and thorny because it talks about men's relationship to women and God's relationship to himself.
Yeah.
And maps those two things next to each other in ways that
yes.
feel complicated. So that's what, and I haven't studied this passage deeply
Yeah.
in a long time.
Well, I'm excited to talk about the head coverings. I'm most excited to talk about what you just said about God and Jesus' relationship and man and woman's and how those map onto each other.
Okay.
Because that has become the most beautiful part of this passage to me.
Well, that feels like the one that's most controversial to
It
everybody.
won't be by the end of it. I
So-
think we'll all be worshiping.
I'm so excited.
It's going to be great. So, okay. So, again, we kind of set this up in the last episode about Corinth being this pagan Greek city, and a lot of the pagan Greek practices were making their way into the church. So, we talked about how food sacrificed to idols, they were having communion with demons in the temple, and then going to church and having communion with Jesus in the Lord's Supper. And it's like, let's figure out what the relationship between these two meals is for you guys. After the passage here on head coverings, he's going to talk about another practice that's made it into the Christian church from the pagan temples. And it's that the rich would go to the pagan temples, they would overeat to the point of vomiting, and they would overdrink to the point of getting drunk.
Yeah.
Well, now they're using the Lord's Supper for that.
Okay.
And they're turning communion into a vomitorium
Awesome.
drunk fest.
Wow.
So that's not good.
I have always wanted a little bit more wine during communion.
It's very small.
It's
very
pretty small.
small.
I want a
Maybe
little bit
not
more
that
bread,
much.
a little bit more wine,
Yeah.
but not that much.
Just enough.
Just enough.
Yeah. But and so I think it's very helpful to know that is the context right now for this whole diatribe that Paul is on, is he's trying to get the pagan out of the Corinthian Christians and get Christ into them.
Okay.
And so one of
The things that the Corinthians would have assumed were normal when it relates to worshiping God is like, oh, these things are not helpful in worshiping Jesus.
That's right.
Okay.
Or in fact, they could be exactly counter to worshiping Jesus. So one of the things that would happen in a pagan temple were head coverings would be used.
Okay.
So you're absolutely right. And I think it's extremely helpful to talk about the ubiquity, the normalcy of head coverings in Roman society, Greek society, Jewish society, like all throughout this time.
Yeah.
Like especially for women, it was very, very common, and you can find it all throughout ancient writings that women would cover their heads. Both just as a sign of modesty. We'll talk about that in a little bit, about why that was modest. But also, yes, as like a wedding ring. It's like, I'm taken, I'm not available. And maybe even the type of veil would change based on if you were being modest as an unmarried woman. Or if you were completely covered as a married woman. You're taken.
And even now, there's something like of that kind of like divide between like availability and unavailability in like Muslim cultures. Like I understand this from just from Muslim folks. It's like when you hit puberty, that's when you put on the hijab. Like there's something that happens. There's something sexual-ish about, and a modesty is like,
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So it's a very, I just think, can we commonize this just a little bit here and not be like, what are these head coverings?
Can I ask a question about why it's common? Is it just cultural practice?
Okay.
Or is it like religiously motivated? Because isn't this a passage where he said because of the angels?
Yes, we'll get there.
Okay, but so the reason I asked, I'm just like pushing this here, is like, is this just like, hey, we've been doing this for thousands of years?
Okay, great.
Or is it like, no, the gods demand this type of thing?
We could have a whole episode about cultural head coverings through the ages.
Okay.
That I would be very bad at leading.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I know what's happening in Corinth in the first century. So I can only talk about that.
Then let me ask this question. Would the average woman in Corinth been doing it? It's like, this is what everybody does. Is that what you would think? Or it's like, I'm doing this because the gods want me to.
Okay, good. Yes. So the average woman in Corinth would, in public, be wearing a head covering.
Okay.
Because, yes, that is the normal thing to do. I don't think that they would typically actually tie deity to it.
Okay.
And let me just explain a little bit about what's going on here. So, and what's funny is I did way too much reading around this idea.
Okay.
So I have more information to share than I need to, but there's a few things that came to the surface for me. One is it became such a big deal in the Roman Empire that women should cover their heads, and we're going to get into why. That they actually, Rome employed as part of their official, like part of their army or like their government. Like I can't remember the name of it. There's a Latin name kind of, or a Greek name for it, but it was basically like the morality police, or like the modesty police.
Hilarious.
And if you walked around with your head uncovered, you would get in trouble.
But like Roman law.
Fascinating. Yeah, and they had people on their employ that were the modesty police.
So it was just called. Was it considered immodest?
It was, definitely. Okay. And let me explain a little bit why. I'll try to be sensitive here.
Okay. Oh gosh.
No, it's a little strange.
Okay.
Because
like when you say modesty, I'm just thinking like cultural values around what is considered appropriate. Oh, it's not appropriate to cover your head. In the same way, it's not appropriate to show your ankles, or it's not appropriate to wear a bikini. Like there's just different. Yeah. But when you say sensitive, it makes me think
there's something else on the line.
There's something else on the line other than cultural.
So there's something biological and medical on the line here with head coverings for women in this time. So the hair of a woman was seen in this time as a sign of her fertility. Okay. And if you read Hippocrates, like the father of modern medicine kind of guy, like the Hippocratic Oath, guy, he wrote and talked about how the hair of woman was hollow.
Okay. Is that true? That's not true, is it?
No.
Okay. I was like,
none of this is medically accurate.
I'm like, I don't know women's hair, but like my hair is not hollow, I don't think.
And the more hair she had, and the bigger and more voluminous it was, she had more room to receive the seed of a man. Okay. And so she had the capacity to receive fertilization.
Yeah, like the other, it's like wide hips would be the other. Oh, yes. Or large breasts.
That's right.
These would be the other
signs of fertility.
Signs of fertility.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And so hair became this sign of being able to receive seed. So much so that they actually had these practices where they would have like a suppository given to a woman. Okay. And it would be scented. Okay. And they would smell her hair to see if the connection was made.
Fascinating.
And if the smell was in her hair, they would say, oh yeah, she is fertile.
Okay.
And so there's this, I'm just saying there's this deep connection
between fertility and hair.
Got it. Okay. In the same way, men would not want long hair. Oh. And you can understand why without me connecting the dots.
Yeah. It's because it would, I mean.
You don't want to show that you're receiving that.
Right.
That.
Yeah,
right?
although homosexual practice was common.
It was.
in ancient Greece.
Yeah, and if you had long hair, maybe it was a sign
Oh,
that you were ready for that.
okay. Fascinating. Okay.
That's the background here.
Okay.
Okay. And
I mean, Hippocrates was a couple hundred years before this letter,
Yeah.
but like that culture remained to that day, which is why maybe the head covering thing is in the same way. It's like, this is why we wear flowy dresses and whatever else.
That's
like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, that's the outside the temple Greek-Roman thing.
Okay.
Okay. Now, in order to understand what's happening in this passage, we have, because all that would be totally fine, I think, for the common practice of the church.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, just keep wearing your head coverings and be normal.
Yeah.
The problem was
Yeah.
these things got twisted inside the pagan temples.
Okay.
So when people would go to worship inside these Greek pagan temples, the roles would reverse in a sense. Men would start covering their heads, and women would uncover their heads.
Okay.
And we'll get into why.
Okay. I can guess why women would uncover their heads.
What's your guess?
My guess is like this is the time for revelry and partying,
Yes.
and I'm ready.
That's right.
And then for men, I don't understand why they would cover their heads.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, let me double click on the one that's a little easier.
Yeah.
The women one. Yes. In these temple cults, fertility, sexual exploration, revelry was, like we talked about in our last episode, a way to uninhibit the flesh
Okay.
and elevate the spirit, while at the same time gaining the attention of the gods because they're nasty too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so and if I fertilize a cult prostitute, like a woman in a temple, perhaps the gods will fertilize my land with rain.
Yep.
So there's this connection with sex and the land
Yeah.
that they had.
There was something, I mean, just to say, there was something like voyeuristic about what was happening in the temple for the gods. And it functioned like some sort of like pornography for the gods.
Yeah.
And if you could sufficiently excite the gods,
Yeah,
like,
they
okay,
would give you what you want.
I'll pay for that service.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of what's happening there. Another, and the women with like long hair who would do this, they were kind of upper echelon, kind of in the temple.
Okay.
There was also another group of women in the temple who had the exact opposite of this. They had shorn hair.
Okay.
They had shaved their heads.
Okay.
This was a sign that they were available for sexual exploitation without the risk of fertilization.
Okay.
So you could sleep with them and they wouldn't get pregnant. How do you know that? They have no hair.
Okay.
They can't receive your
Okay.
fertilization. So that's why we cut their hair off, because they can't get pregnant now. And so women who were sold into sexual slavery or who were full-time cult prostitutes in the temples would often have shaved heads.
Okay, so the women who went there voluntarily would be the ones with the wild hair taking their veils off. And then there would be sex slaves essentially in the temple, or perhaps it was voluntary. I don't know how that worked.
Yeah.
But they would be, this is my job here.
Yeah.
And so that was like a sign of almost like prostitution would be a
Yep.
shaved head.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and there is gray area here. We're historically reconstructing.
Okay.
We don't have detailed accounts of all of this in antiquity, but we have enough information to piece together some things. I just want to say, like, don't concretize this as this is exactly how it worked historically.
But these are the types of things that were happening around this time.
It's enough context to understand what's happening in Paul, not enough to historically and accurately reconstruct
what happened when Paul wasn't around.
Exactly.
80, whatever.
Yeah, and so historians disagree about the particulars, but the context remains the same.
Okay.
So like some people say that women with long hair in the temples who unveiled themselves were the high priestesses, that they had great power in the temples.
Fascinating.
But others say, no, these were just men's wives, and they wanted to impregnate them in the temples so that the gods would see and then impregnate their land, or that they might have a higher chance for fertilization in the temple than outside the temple.
Yeah.
So again, there's so many different reconstructions, but you can see the point of like where Paul's going to land.
Hair
with this stuff.
equals fertility. Shorn hair equals like sexual opportunity without the possibility of fertility.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So then men would often would never cover their heads in public, like as a sign of modesty.
Just like me.
Just like you. If they ever covered their heads, it was a sign of authority.
Okay.
And so they would take part of the bottom part of their toga, and they would lift it up over their head. What's interesting is, in Corinth,
Like while they were wearing it.
mm-hmm, yeah,
Okay.
there was enough extra fabric.
Okay.
They weren't flashing. Yeah, no, there was enough extra
weird
fabric.
flex, man, but okay.
But they would
Like-
take extra fabric and
Yeah.
and wrap it over their heads as a
Okay.
temporary head covering, and they usually did that as a sign of authority. Now,
Okay.
in Corinth, there is a statue that we actually know was there around this
fascinating.
time, and it was of a Caesar,
Okay.
and
He's doing this?
and Caesar is doing this
Can
work.
I see a photo of this?
Christine's holding it up over here,
Fascinating. Okay.
so you can look it up.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the high
Okay.
priest of Rome, Pontifex Maximus, is what Christine just said. She pulled it up. So
Okay.
yeah, so you can
And-
Google that,
okay.
and you can see the statue.
Okay.
And so he does this. He pulls up
Okay.
his toga over his head to show it's this blended role of authority and of like political and religious authority. So he is the Pontifex Maximus,
Mm-hmm.
but he's also over the religious institutions too. So there's this head covering that men would do in the temples that showed a religious authority inside of it. So
Okay.
often what this would look like is when they would pray or prophesy in their
Yeah.
temples or lead temple worship in these pagan temples,
Uh,
men would cover their heads to show, hey, I am now hearing from the gods, and I am operating
in my priestly.
in my priestly function as a pagan authority
Okay.
here in this pagan temple. And so that's what they would do. Now, a few things are happening there. One, some people think, again, historical reconstructions
Sure.
abound.
I'm just learning a whole bunch about the different ways people covered their heads.
Oh, I know it, man. Welcome to my last month.
The difference between baseball hats and cowboy hats in ancient Greece.
This is it. And so
and the pointy hats.
The pointy hats.
They're like
A dunce?
like the Pope wears.
oh, that one.
Like, yeah, like we have religious
We have religious hats.
hats. That's
Yes, we
all
do.
I'm
Yeah.
saying.
I wear many religious hats. No. Okay. So one reason the men would cover their heads is as a sign of authority. And so a
Okay.
lot of times people think that it was only the wealthy or the socially influential who would perform this sign in the temple. And so not only was it a sign of religious authority, but social authority. And so it was usually
Okay.
the wealthy, the well-off, those with a lot of...
And presumably because when you go in the temple, you're functioning. This is a religious space,
Mhm.
and so I'm taking on a religious role here. Whether I'm a woman, I'm taking on the role of the fertile one
Yep.
in hopes of fertility, and as a man, I'm taking on the role of
Oh, I'm glad you're searching for it because we're about to talk about it.
like priestly authority or like the presider over the feast or something like that.
Or
Okay.
here's the other idea, is they're covering up their humanity to stand in for the gods. They're veiling their humanity to show that there's actually another power at play. And Paul's going to pick up on this. This is why I'm double clicking on it.
So say it again.
So they are covering up their heads to veil their humanness, their bodies. Again, remember Plato, this
Yeah.
Platonic Greek view, body bad, spirit good. And so they're covering up their bodies so you can't see them.
Who can't? I mean, I could.
Yeah. But it's a symbol, right? You cover up your head to veil the humanity,
Just like to shroud your
to
shape.
shroud your shape,
Okay.
and as a sign that now I'm not David anymore. I'm the God
Yeah.
that's in this temple, and I'm representing them, or I'm hearing from them. Or sometimes some people say they would wrap the shroud around their heads as a way to say that their ears were covered from the prayers and the noise around them, and they could only hear the voice of their gods.
Okay.
So there's all of this suppression of the mortal, of the physical, to elevate the supernatural.
Okay.
And so there's authority, priesthood, the degradation of the body for the elevation of the spirit.
Okay.
All of that is kind of happening
Okay.
when a man covers his head in a religious service.
Would men always cover their head in religious service?
No,
Okay.
only those who were acting in authority.
Okay. So not if you went to one of these Corinthian events
Yep.
in the temple, not all the men around the table would be doing this. But
Again, historical reconstruction is difficult, but most sources I found
there would be at least one or two men who function as like the high priest in that moment or
in
something.
that moment, and then it might shift and somebody else might take
Okay.
over. Yeah.
It's like-
And some people said that this is what all men did.
Okay.
But-
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
But that's what men did. The point here is in pagan temples, women unveiled their heads and men veiled their heads.
Okay.
So you come in then to 1 Corinthians 11, and like it's happening all throughout Paul's letter to the church in Corinth, they are bringing pagan practices into the Christian church. Well, they're doing this now. They're coming into a Christian church like, oh, I know what to do in a religious service. So the women take their veils off and the men cover their heads.
Okay.
And
Makes
he's like,
sense.
you're being pagan.
It would be I mean, this is a dumb example, but like I've visited mosques before.
Yes.
Where like I have to take my shoes off.
Yes.
And if I'm with women, they have to cover their heads.
Yep.
So that's what you do when you enter a mosque.
That's right.
And so if you're used to coming to mosque and you show up at my church on Sunday morning, it would be, I was like, do you take your shoes off? I'm like, oh, you don't have to do that here. You don't have to do that here.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Right. So they're bringing a different religious practice
Fascinating.
into the Christian church. And so they're being pagan. So at the very, very least, this passage is talking to us about how not to bring syncretistic pagan practices into the Christian church. At the very least. There's a lot more going on, but at the very least. So let's this is short enough. This is 16 verses.
Okay.
So let's just read through it.
Okay.
Now that we just needed all this context.
Can I interrupt as I have questions?
Absolutely, please.
Okay.
Yes. So, verse 2 of chapter 11. Now, I commend you because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions, even as I delivered to you. So he's like, you're doing a good job.
Okay.
Kind of.
He's like,
he's buttering him up.
he's like, we're on the right road, guys.
That's right. He goes, but, verse 3.
Okay.
I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ. The head of a wife is her husband, or the head of woman is man.
Okay.
That's a translation choice.
Okay.
And the head of Christ is God.
Okay.
Okay.
Why husband and wife here?
So based on context, you can usually know if he's talking about man or woman, husband and wife. A lot of times, those are the same Greek word.
Yes.
And so the interpreters here have to take a guess. Does he mean man and woman, or does he mean husband and wife?
Oh, I guess I meant why the relational dynamic here. It's like, why is he talking about the relationship between man and woman?
Oh, why is he bringing that up?
Because we've been talking about the relationship between the gods and humans. Like, women open up their hair to like express fertility, and when men cover it to express like divine power in some sense. But like when they did that in the temple, like how did men and women, I guess maybe just draw the lines for me a little bit?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
well, let's remember, you and I were having a conversation about context and background.
Yes.
We're now jumping into Paul's argument.
Okay.
So that's not on the line yet.
Okay.
Right. He hasn't brought this up yet.
Okay.
So he hasn't breached the topic yet.
Okay.
So he's just starting here. And so I think he's starting here with, let's talk about the right relationship between men and women.
Okay.
Like, I think he's like, that's the next thing we're going to talk about.
Okay.
I want you to understand that there's a right ordering in relationships between men and women.
Okay.
And so he starts to lay that out. I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ, the head of a woman is man, and the head of Christ is God.
Okay.
So he's talking about this ordering of relationship between man, woman, Jesus, God, or woman, man, Jesus, God. And we can come back to this, or you can double click now. What do you want to do? You want to?
Well, I think on the broadest level, all we're saying is like there's a right way to relate to God and to one another.
Yes.
And I'm assuming the word head is loaded here because we've been talking about head coverings.
Yeah, he's about to talk about
head coverings.
He's about to talk about head coverings.
Okay.
So I think I promise I'm not jumping over this.
Yes.
We'll come back to it.
Okay.
I just think it's more beautiful to kind of end on.
Okay, great. Okay. Great.
So we will come back to this because I want to unpack what that means. Every man, so this is verse 4, every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head.
So he dishonors God.
Oh, interesting. I actually hadn't put that together.
Oh, fast. Well, I mean, he just said the head of every man is Christ or God.
Yeah,
so.
You're absolutely right. I guess I did put it together, just not in those words. So yes, the idea here is if a man covers his head, and he's going to get into it here in a second. We'll jump to it. If a man covers his head, he's dishonoring Christ.
Okay.
Because Christ is his head.
That's
and
right.
He's going to go on to say, let's just jump to it here. It is verse 7. For a man ought not cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God.
Okay.
So whereas the priests in the temple
would hide their
image to elevate an invisible or idol God, he's like, no, men, humans, I made you in my image. You already bear my glory. Don't cover it up.
Okay.
You preach a sermon by just not covering up your head.
Yeah.
Like, you are my image and glory.
Don't hide the fact that you're my representative on here. Display it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he's pushing against the Plato brain stuff of, body bad, spirit good.
And even just the cultural practice
That's
of
right.
covering your head and all that means.
That's right. He's like, no, humans are good. I made them. I love them. I died for them. I became like them.
Okay.
And so don't dishonor the incarnation of Jesus who
Yeah.
became human by covering up your head as a shameful thing.
Yeah.
Don't put shame on the incarnated Christ.
Yeah. Okay.
That's fascinating.
No, it is fascinating. And it's like, he says it really starkly. Like, when you do that, you dishonor God.
Yeah.
The God who made you, the God who formed you, the God who's placed you in this position of presumably church authority. You're praying and prophesying over the church. Like, you're dishonoring God when you cover yourself in that way.
That's right. Because you are preaching a pagan sermon.
Fascinating.
Because you're saying like, oh, I'm not made in the image of God.
Uh-huh.
But yes, you are.
Fascinating.
And Jesus was made in the image of man. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Jesus became man. So that connection again, like,
yes.
Jesus is the head of man.
Yes.
It's like Jesus became like us so we could become like him. Like, there's this deep connection between who we are as humans and who God is. He became human. So don't shamefully cover that up, but expose it. So going back now, verse 5, but every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head, since it is the same as if her head were shaven.
Okay.
Thoughts here?
Okay, so every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered as a sign of fertility and openness to the gods dishonors her husband, or presumably,
or even Christ himself, because there's a chain.
Yeah.
Right? Or even her own head, her own physical head.
Well, the only head mentioned, the head of a wife is her husband. So just like is in my thinking, if you can correct me when I'm wrong. So if a wife like displays her fertility publicly, she is dishonoring her husband, and it's expressing a sexual availability similar to cult prostitution.
Sure. Let's drill down there. I think there's more, but that's really good. So if you had this married woman who everywhere else in life would cover her head to show she's not available, then comes into church and just takes off her veil and uncovers her fertility hair, her husband's going to be ashamed of that. Like, are you telling the whole church that you're available? Like, in our context, that wouldn't make as much sense. But in this one, it would. It would be very shameful for her husband or for all the men present.
Or if the couple is used to the Greek context, it would be communicating a type of like sexual availability that is endearing the gods to us in some way.
So I think this is more of like the white hot center of the passage here is in unveiling herself. She is saying that Jesus is like the pagan gods. And that she can worship him the way that she has worshipped the pagan gods. That Jesus wants to be incited by sexual availability.
Okay.
What a horrific idea. What a shameful thing to put on the head of Jesus.
And Paul literally says that earlier, right? When he talks about when you have sex with a prostitute, this is you're
uniting Jesus with that prostitute.
That's right. He connects those two things earlier.
Yeah, and it's like, do not do that. And he says, whenever a woman does this and unveils her hair in church, he's saying it's the same as if her head were shaven. What's he saying there?
He's saying it would be as if she's. Well, you said that people they were prostitutes, prostitutes.
That's right.
So it's like to express that type of like, fertility. I don't know that
fertility in a religious culture.
You would be making yourself like one of these cult prostitutes.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep. So you're bringing this horrific pagan practice into the body of Christ.
Yeah.
Like, that is disgusting.
Yes.
We do not practice this sexual worship the way the pagans do. So keep your head covered.
Yeah.
Because
that's right.
This is not where we do
This is not how we communicate to our God, nor how we relate to our spouse.
That's right.
Like, this is not That's not like that. Though the rules of the Greek system don't apply here.
We are not pagan worshipers, and our God is not a pagan God.
Okay.
He is holy and good and pure.
Okay.
And you're communicating that he is nasty and vile, right? Like,
yeah.
do
That's
not
right.
do that.
That's right.
And also, that's not what he wants for your body.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to honor your body. You are his glory. Like, you bear his image. So,
Yeah.
like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So we can
Okay.
keep going here. Verse 6, for if a wife will not cover her head, then she should cut her hair short. Basically saying the same thing. Like, hey, it's basically, if you're going to act like a cult prostitute, might as well look like one.
Okay.
But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut her hair short or shave her head, just let her cover her head. So it's like, since you don't want your wife to look like a cult prostitute, just keep your head covering
Since
on.
you don't want to look like a
Yeah,
cult
exactly.
prostitute.
Yeah, so just
Since
maybe-
you don't want to you woman, your relationship with God is not based off your fertility.
That's right. Which is really good news.
Or your availability to his voyeuristic gaze.
That's right.
Cover your, like just
cover
we don't
your
need to do we don't need to do this.
Yeah, Jesus loves you all the same.
Yeah.
You don't need
Okay.
to do anything. Yes, exactly. And then we already talked about man covering their head in verse 7.
Yes.
And
that-
it says,
yeah.
since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. So it's an interesting passage here. So man shouldn't cover their head because he's the glory of God,
he's
right?
been made in God's image.
Don't cover that up. Preach the
Yes.
sermon with your
Yeah.
face.
Pray,
Like,
prophesy. Yeah.
But woman is made in the image of man, is the glory of man. And that's a good thing. Like I think about this as a man, and I'm
Yes.
like, if I think about a beautiful human, I'm thinking a woman.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
are more glorious than we are, Seth.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they like
Yeah.
they are the glory of man. That's why you hide them. Like, right? Like, that's the idea. Like,
We hide our wives?
no, but that's the idea behind head coverings.
Oh, I understand.
Is they're so beautiful.
Yeah.
You cover it up.
Yeah.
And he talk about later in chapter 12 when he talks about the spiritual gifts and how we're different parts of the body. He's like, think about the most sensitive, most beautiful parts of your body. Don't you cover them up? Like your private parts? Like, you don't show those to everybody. The most beautiful things get covered. And so woman is the glory of man.
Yes.
But what's the purpose of the church, the gathered church service? Is it to glory in man or God?
Right.
To glory in God.
Yeah.
So keep the worship of God central in the church. That's an extra bonus of the head covering is let's not focus on what the pagans focus on in their worship. They focus on the beautiful women and having sex with them. Let's focus on the beauty of God and communing with him through his ordained ways.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me read that again. Make sure I understood you. So, for a man ought not to cover his head, since he's the image of the glory of God. You don't need to shroud your humanity because you are God's representative on the earth. Be bold about that.
Yep.
Represent your God well.
Yeah.
Represent your God well. And woman is the glory of man, meaning that she is a glorious part of this creation. And let me say it maybe a little more scandalously, and maybe the Greeks are onto something, in the sense that she is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
She is fertile. She creates life.
Right. Yeah.
Men do not create life
Right. In the same way. Yeah.
in the same way on this earth. However, there's a humility to covering our head, and we want to focus on the image of Christ.
Yes.
And so in this particular context, let's not bring in the baggage of fertility.
Yes.
Let's not talk about humans' capability
Yeah.
to create life.
Right.
Let's focus on God, the image of God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's going to talk about this.
Oh, and then maybe, and just to, because I immediately started thinking like, well, men and women, he created them in the image of God. Together, the image of God.
Oh, yes.
So it would be almost as if the hair is a distraction from the image. The hair has taken on such a life of its own.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Good.
That
yeah.
to keep the man's head uncovered and the woman's head covered almost kind of makes them look the same. Short hair, right?
Sure, yeah.
But like this focuses the church gathered
On the glory of God alone.
on the glory of God alone,
Yeah.
and not on the pomp of religious activity by covering your head in the men, or the excitement
Yep.
of the gods. And
That's right.
letting your hair flow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you're onto it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then he kind of he talks a little bit about he unpacks verse 8 a little bit more in verse 9 or 8 and 9, sorry, man was not made from woman, but woman from man. So that he's talking about, why is man the glory of God and woman the glory of man? Well, God made man in his image,
Yes.
and then he made woman from man. So
woman literally is the glory of man in the sense that only women birth men.
Yeah, he's going to talk about that later too,
okay.
which is really fascinating.
Okay.
And then neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. Like, hey, I've given you this helper.
Okay.
In the Garden of Eden,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
You are alone and in need
Yes.
of a companion.
Yeah.
I made you woman for you to glory in.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just if anybody needs this, like the only other character in the Bible who's called a helper like woman is God himself.
Yeah.
So this is not a bad title. It's a very, very good title. And a man glories in his wife, Adam gloried in Eve. Oh, at last, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh.
Yeah.
Like he gloried in her.
Yeah.
Like she's a good creation. I just want to
Yeah.
dispel any bad readings of this.
Yes.
Okay. So then that is why, verse 10, that is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Okay. Here we go.
Okay. So symbol of authority.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Feels foreign.
Yes, it should, because I don't think it's a good translation.
Based off of everything we've been talking about.
Exactly right. Yep. Okay. So this word, the word translated here, authority, isn't usually translated authority in this way. It is the same word used to talk about the spiritual realm, the authorities.
Oh, like the principalities.
The principalities.
And powers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And which makes sense that he says because of the angels. So let's just keep in the same semantic universe here.
So this is why a wife ought to have a symbol of. I don't know what would a good translation be.
Yeah,
here?
I don't know. Maybe why they've had trouble glossing this, but this is why a wife should have a symbol for the authorities, like for the angels, or a symbol of.
Wait, let me ask this question:
Yeah.
Is the authorities good authorities or bad authorities? Is it like demons? Is this angels in the good context, or are we talking about like?
We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
I don't know which one he specifically has in mind for that.
It makes it a little more like, I think I could understand it quicker if it was negative spiritual powers.
Which I think is maybe an okay way to think about this, because he is hyperlinking us to a kind of negative spiritual story. So he is referencing here the story of the Nephilim in Genesis.
Is he?
Yes. So
can I say what I thought you were going to say?
Oh, sure.
Because I was like, if we're thinking about negative spiritual powers, I was like, this is why women should have a hair covering, because she is not worshiping the pagan gods anymore.
Yes, absolutely correct.
She's not worshiping the pagan gods anymore. And then because of the angels would just be a way to continue to explain that.
Yep.
Why should a woman have a symbol of authority? What a symbol that
it's a symbol to the authorities.
Yes.
About her modesty. She's not sexually available to the spiritual beings.
Yes.
Which is what she would do the opposite.
That's right.
In the pagan temples. She'd take off her veil in the pagan temples to say that she is available for demonized sexuality.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. And so she's saying, no, I'm not here for that.
Fascinating.
I do not want spiritual communion through sex in church.
Which is why this goes back to the story of the Nephilim.
Yes, because what happened? These spiritual beings found the daughters of women attractive and wanted to sleep with them.
Okay.
And that's exactly the kind of stories that would happen in pagan temples and what they were trying to even recreate.
Right.
And so they're saying like, no, we want to commune with Jesus alone and not sexually. That's not how we commune with the divine.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to commune with anybody except Jesus.
And so that's why maybe authority is a helpful translation. The fact that it's like, this symbolizes my authority to Christ alone.
That's right. Yep.
And my monogamy to my husband alone.
Yes. I just wanted to get there.
Yeah.
I think it's a good translation. But we have to understand, what do we mean? Because I think we as Western 21st century people can read this and be like, a symbol of male domination on her head.
I understand.
Right? Like authority. Like, submit. And it's like, no. A symbol
of the right relationship between God and man.
Yes. It's like, my head belongs to Christ alone. It's like this, and he is my authority alone. And I do not want anything to do with those nasty pagan practices.
Yes. And the word head like implies that type of authority.
That's
so
right.
Probably if you're a Greek speaker, you're like, oh, head implies authority. We're talking about the same
we're gonna
thing.
get to that. We're gonna get to that.
Okay.
Strike that from the record. Oh, listeners.
Oh,
We're going to talk
listeners.
about the meaning of head here in a little bit. Okay. Let's see. What verse were we in here? Oh,
Verse
10. So now we're in
10.
11. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. For as woman was made from man, so now man is born of woman.
Okay,
And
that's what I
all
said.
things are from God. You said this earlier.
This is why women are the glory of man.
It's one.
But
I think
reason.
another thing that's happening here is he's rounding out the picture of the relationship between men and women. He's like, hey, women came from men, but now men come from women.
Okay.
So if you try to do some kind of like, oh yes, women came from me, I'm superior
Adam,
over her.
God pulled
the rib of Adam.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like, well, yeah, man, but now you come from woman, so is she superior? No,
Right.
all things are from God. Like all things are from God. This is the point. And so I think here is where I want to come into talk about headship.
Okay.
This all things are from God. He's rounding out this picture of like, yes,
Yes.
women came from men when Eve came from Adam,
Yes.
but now men come from women in childbirth.
Mm-hmm.
And he's rounding out this picture, and all things come from God. So let's go back to the beginning of this chapter and talk about this headship language.
Okay.
So he said, I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ. The head of a wife is her husband, or the head of woman is man,
Okay.
and the head of Christ is God.
Okay.
So what I find really interesting here is there's a lot of scholarship around this idea that talks about that the primary definition for head in the first century wasn't authority, but there
Okay.
is another primary meaning to this word, and I think it fits the context better.
Okay.
And it's the idea of source.
Yes.
So the idea that like the head of a river, head of a lake is a river or something like that, right?
Yeah.
That they feed into
That's
one
right.
another.
That's right.
And so this whole idea of man comes from Christ and Christ comes from God and woman comes from man and all things come from God is his point here is unity and oneness. And that he's trying to say in the pagan world, and even in our world today, like there's a lot of division around male, female. There's a lot of subordination. There's a lot of mistreatment.
Yes.
But can I just show you even biologically, like in the Garden of Eden,
there's an interdependence.
there's an interdependency between man and woman, and man comes from Christ, and woman is from man, but we're all in God. And so I think one of the points he's making here in how do we understand the right relationship between men and women is that we are independently connected to God through Christ.
Yes.
And because a huge point he's trying to make
independently or interdependently?
Interdependently.
Yes.
So sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Interdependently connected to God through Christ.
Yes.
And one of the points he's trying to make throughout 1 Corinthians is about unity. There's all this division. And he's like, look, we're just one in Christ. So I know out there in the pagan temples, men cover their heads to say, I have the authority. And then women uncover their heads to have sexual authority over men. There's all this broken relationship. He's like, guys, we're one in Christ. Now, there's another school of thought that talks about the head as authority.
Yeah, and this is what I think more familiar with. I think Preston Sprinkle does a long, I think it's like a 4-hour podcast that I listen to.
Yeah.
Where he reads every instance of the word head in scripture and in Greek literature on 100 years either side of this particular text.
Yes.
Which is fascinating. Did
you
hear about this?
I did, yeah. And he was actually one that I read a lot for this.
Man, so I was like,
study.
I was super helped by him. And so I would recommend that podcast.
Very good.
Podcast.
Yes.
If you want 4 hours of somebody talking about it's not interesting. It's not interesting. What I took away from that podcast was like, it seems like, well, yes, there are occasions when the word kephale, which is the word head, is used metaphorically as it's used here, that it can mean source. It seems as if it leans towards implying some level of authority. And the reason I bring it up is because I don't believe that authority necessarily implies division.
No, and it shouldn't.
Right? And so, which is why I bring it up here. It's like, I think...
And I didn't mean to paint that dichotomy.
You didn't. But it's like, even if kephale implies a level of authority here, that wouldn't undermine Paul's point
It would not.
in the sense that it's like, because
It should not.
it should not.
Right.
Like, yes, has there been domination
Oh, yes.
by men towards women
Yes.
and women towards men,
Absolutely.
and the gods towards,
Yes.
right. Yes.
Rightly ordered authority.
But rightly ordered authority
Yes.
is no threat to the unity of the church.
And in fact, it can increase it.
That's right.
Like a well-designed authority structure that's healthy in an organization creates unity in that organization, right?
Yes.
We understand that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So I'd say that, like, I think there's more to be said there, but like, I think we get the gist.
Yes.
Either it's a symbol of like men and women are interdependent and come from God equally and come from each other equally.
Yep.
They are sourced from one another
That's
and come
right.
from God.
Yep.
Or the other way to say it is God has instituted good hierarchy. I don't like the word hierarchy, but good and right ordering of relationships between God and humanity and men and women and Christ and even Christ and God. There's some sort
Right. Yes.
of ordered relationship between Jesus on the
Yeah.
earth and
Yeah.
God in heaven.
So let's talk about that because I think there is something really beautiful there. So you look at the relationship between Christ and God, right?
Yes.
And that if he's like Jesus' source is God, or God is the authority of Jesus, or however you want to word that. The head
Yes.
of Jesus is God.
Yes.
What did that relationship look like? Right? Well, God gloried in Jesus. This is my beloved Son whom I love. In him I'm well pleased. I want to share my kingdom and my glory and my fame with him. I'm gonna lift him up so that his name's above every other name. Like God just glories in the Son.
That's right.
And then what does the Son do? The Son submits to the Father. And in all things, I only do whatever the Father says. Like, I'm only going to follow his will. Not my will, but your will be done. And you do have this beautiful relationship of headship, whatever that means, that Jesus is getting his source from the Lord, right? Or that there's an authority there, or, and then what? And then the source comes back to the head in all glory, like getting lifted up above everything. And he's like, okay, men and women, let's mimic that. Men, glory in women, like glory in your wives. Like they are the glory of humanity. Like they're the crowning achievement of humanity. Like glory in them. Like you should lift them up. You should praise them. Like they should be well loved. Right? And women, like what's the response here is like, man, help and come alongside your partner. And there can be this beautiful relationship here.
Well, it's funny that now that we say all this, the rhetorical question in verse 13 makes a lot of sense. He's like, now, with all that in your head, verse 13, judge for yourself. Is it proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered? It's like, okay, knowing all this, knowing that like God is our source, our authority, or like knowing that we are meant to image God in the church together as men and women, knowing that husbands and wives are meant for a relationship with one another solely, not with everybody who would come in the temple. Like knowing all this, knowing that we have this beautiful relationship between God and Christ. What do you think we should do? It's like it feels like the answer's so obvious.
The answer's obvious now.
The answer, it's like, are we trying to communicate, like incite the gods with our fertility?
Right. Of course not.
Of course not.
Yeah. So judge for yourselves. Is this a good idea? Yeah. And then he goes on in verse, because you just read verse 13. Yeah. So in 14 he says, "Does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it is a disgrace for him?" So what was funny the first time I was reading this in studying it, I didn't quite know what part of nature he was talking about. And I was like, I said, well, a lion's mane doesn't prove that.
Right.
And I was like, a lion's mane, like a male lion's long hair isn't a disgrace to him.
Yeah.
So I was like, what is he talking about?
And I was like, let me just go with it. It's like, and I've also, visited cultures where long hair is just seen as a symbol of wisdom. Like I've spent a bit of time in China. It's like it's just a little bit. There's more gravitas towards folks with long hair.
That's right. But what's interesting, and in Jewish culture, you take like the Nazirite vow.
That's right.
You might have very long hair. Paul himself, some think, might have had long hair, having taken the Nazirite vow, possibly.
Yeah.
So he could have had long hair, but he was
Yeah.
Jewish, so they would have expected it.
Okay.
He's talking to a specific culture here, and he's saying, hey, you guys know what you think just naturally whenever you see a guy with long hair in Corinth. And this is what we talked about earlier.
Yes. Oh,
Right?
if it is a scientific fact, as discovered by Hippocrates, that our hair are hollow receptacles for
go.
the seeds of the gods,
Yes.
or men,
Or men, yes.
the seed of men. Doesn't nature tell us? Doesn't science tell
That
us?
if a man has long hair, he's asking for another male relationship.
Fascinating.
And he's like, I mean, you know that, and that's disgraceful, like in this context here. Like, you know that that's disgraceful. But if a woman has long hair, it's her glory. Because women are supposed to bear children and be
Women are
fertile.
supposed
Like,
to-
that's a good thing, to be fruitful and multiply. So he's kind of just making a natural case for the Corinthians specifically.
Yeah. It's like, here's what you consider natural,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
And like, if based on your conception of what's natural, don't you agree that men should keep their
Yeah.
hair short?
So yeah, he's kind of made like several like logical and religious, spiritual, even like Old Testament arguments. Now he's just making an obvious cultural one.
Fascinating.
He's like, put it together here. Do you know what you're communicating, men, if you uncover your hair or have long hair?
Yeah.
And he says, for her hair is given to her for a covering.
Oh.
So he's doing another very natural, logical thing again. He's like, hey, women tend to have long hair.
Yes.
Isn't that a sign that head coverings are a good idea? It's just another.
Oh.
Naturally, when men have long hair, you know what you're thinking. Naturally, when women have long hair, it's kind of like another head covering.
Okay.
So even nature itself is telling you
Mm-hmm.
that this is logically sound.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's just trying to make a basic
Yeah.
point here.
Yeah. And if anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no such practice, nor do the churches of God.
So here we go. Here's an important thing for people coming to this,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if people clicked on this podcast episode, wondering what our stance would be for this particular verse.
Okay.
So if anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no such practice, nor do the churches of God.
Meaning, I don't know why that would be contentious. Given everything we've said up to this point,
Yes.
the church isn't a pagan temple.
Yes.
We do not conduct ourselves as the pagans do.
That's right.
The images we display with our head coverings matter.
Mm-hmm.
They don't communicate. We don't want them to accidentally communicate what you're accustomed to them communicating. Therefore, women are going to keep their head covered in our cultural context, and men are going to keep their head uncovered in our cultural context.
Yep.
Agreed? Agreed.
Yeah. And what he's saying here is, I don't know of any church that's practicing this any other way, Corinth.
Yes.
So what are you doing?
Yeah. He's like, you guys are the only ones doing this.
Yeah, you guys are being the weirdos. We don't have
Fascinating.
any other way of practicing head coverings in any church other than men uncovered, women covered. Because it's such a normal cultural practice, and you guys are doing it weird because you're bringing your pagan practices into the church. So stop it.
And specifically Corinthian, perhaps? Is that like...
It could be, but like at least in our New Testament canon. Right?
Yeah.
There could have been 7 of the churches doing this, and this line would still stand.
Yes, yeah.
He's like, I think of like a kid on a playground, who's throwing rocks. Like, if one of my kids were throwing rocks on a playground, all the other kids are playing nicely, I'd be like, Ezra, you're the only one out here throwing rocks.
Yeah.
Well, there might be other playgrounds around where kids are throwing rocks, so.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I've never read this verse this way, because when I read it, if anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no such practice, nor do the churches of God. So I've always kind of assumed Paul has like an apostolic, like we here.
Yes.
And so he's saying, I am saying,
yes,
we, the apostles are not allowing this in the churches of God.
Exactly.
He's not necessarily saying that you're the only church that's doing this.
Right.
He's saying, we're saying this is how we're going to do this.
Yes. I think there's like a jab at like, you're outside of the apostolic command I'm giving.
Yeah.
But this is what I wanted to say is debate, the debate.
Yes.
Is Paul seems to be, like you're saying,
Yeah.
giving an apostolic command to all the churches of God.
Mm-hmm.
To men, don't wear head coverings, women wear head coverings.
Okay.
Which is why to this day, some churches, denominations practice women wearing head coverings in church.
Oh, and I guess this is like kind of like a downstream like artifact of this is that when I notice like we have prayer, men will frequently remove their hats.
Remove their hats.
Men still wear hats at church frequently.
But when they pray or prophesy,
but like or even people in the congregation, like they'll just take it off.
That's right. Yep.
Or so I've noticed that.
Yeah. So this is the question then: is this a law for our church practice today?
Oh, I understand.
This is the controversy here.
Well, my answer to that's like, well, it doesn't mean anything close to what it meant back then. And the reason it was a command was to guard against and to properly communicate the relationship with God and men and women.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, I would completely agree.
Yes.
But I've had this conversation with many people, and the immediate response I get from that answer is, well, then where does it stop?
Okay.
Who are you to decide when culture changes enough to void an apostolic command?
Okay.
That's a pretty good argument.
Yeah.
So like what would you say to that? Like when does culture dictate or not dictate when a command is culturally conditioned or just biblically authoritative?
Didn't we just have this conversation in our last podcast?
Very good. Yes, so good.
Like where we said like the disposition of Christians should be towards like limiting our sense of freedom out of love for neighbor.
That's right. Were women free to have their heads uncovered? Yes. There's nothing against it.
And scientifically, it's not hollow.
And also Hippocrates was wrong.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll unpack that. Keep going about food sacrifice to idols and what we talked about. Apply it to this.
So it's like Paul has already made something of a contextual argument above. He's like, depending on the situation you're in, if you get invited over for dinner, you can eat the food sacrificed to idols. But if your friend tells you that causes him to misunderstand his relationship with God, you should abstain.
Right.
And so presumably that same logic of wisdom would apply. I don't know if it answers that question, but it seems as if what Paul would say is that there is a sense that wisdom has to govern these things.
Or as he says it, conscience.
A conscience has to govern these things. And like that's inherently going to change depending whether you're a Jewish context, a Gentile context, or whatever. Yeah. So that's a
good answer.
I would also just say slippery slope is
a fallacy.
It's a fallacy.
It is a fallacy.
It just because it can happen,
that's right,
and it has happened, doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to happen.
Very good answer as well. Yes, that is a slippery slope fallacy to say, well, when does it stop? It stopped right here. What are you talking about?
Right.
I've only talked about it right here.
Yes, that's right.
What do you want from me?
Yeah.
I think my favorite answer to this question is this is just good exegesis. Is when we read this, if we didn't do the work to understand the culture like we've done the last hour, we would be like, we need to be wearing head coverings. And we would have a lot of weird ideas about why Paul said this, what the extent of it was. But when we understand, they're bringing in pagan practices, and you can actually understand the context of the Bible, which is the job of a Bible reader, then you understand like, oh, well, when I bring my wife to the church, number one, we don't do head coverings in our culture. So that would be weird. Number two, no one would think that I was saying she was available for either like marriage or communion with the demons if she walked into church with her head covered. So it seems like what Paul's saying here doesn't actually directly with regards to head coverings apply to my current cultural situation. So I think that's just good exegesis. So I think it's also a red herring fallacy. To say, well, you're letting culture dictate what's biblically authoritative or not. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm doing good exegesis. This is just understanding the text on its own terms. If you want to say that to blindly read any biblical passage and apply it today without cultural knowledge, I would actually say that's bad exegesis in hermeneutics. You actually need to understand the context. So I would say that it's just a bad question.
So there you go. So
Anyway,
take that.
No, don't take that. No. If you're listening, don't just take that. No, I say that in love. But so there we go. Yeah. I just also want to, I just, as we meditate on the gospel just one last time here, I think it's so amazing when we think about the head coverings and we think about the glory of God and the image of man. I just find the beauty in that Jesus is God. Like, he is God. And yet he clothed himself, covered himself in the veil of man. Like, he became man.
Yeah.
Like, he actually became human and shared our glory. Like, Jesus became like man and was covered in his image so that man could become like God and be covered in his image.
Yeah.
And God's like, so take off the veil and show that image. I'm making you like me. Isn't that good news? Like, that God would become man so that we could become like God. Like, what a beautiful thing. Don't cover that up.
Yeah.
I've made you and am making you into my image. You are my glory. I love you. Like, oh, I just think it's so beautiful.
It is beautiful.
So,
it is beautiful.
Okay. 1 Corinthians 11.
That was amazing. I was really, I learned a lot today.
Yeah. I've been on a journey with this one. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We will have one last probably episode on the hard parts of 1 Corinthians. Next time, we're going to look at chapter 14, where Paul talks about the gift of tongues, the gift of prophecy, and a phrase, women should remain silent in the church. So I hope you join us for that episode. We'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to the Spoken Gospel Podcast. Spoken Gospel creates short films, devotionals, and podcasts like this one. Everything we make is free because of generous supporters like you. To see our resources, visit spokengospel.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening. See you next time.